Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Psalm 67, Praise to the God Who Judges. We start with a short superscription for the choir director with stringed instruments. We're used to seeing that. We've seen that before, which means this is, even if the superscription didn't tell us this is a song. So it's described as a psalm and a song, and now the song begins. God be gracious to us and bless us and cause his face to shine upon us. Now, if you didn't catch that, that's very reminiscent of the Aaronic benediction, the Aaronic blessing found in Numbers chapter 6. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance, actually, it's the same word, his face upon you and give you his peace. But so we don't have the whole thing here, but we have part of it, enough where it's recognizable. And then notice the Selah. Pause and let that sink in. It will come to you if you pause for a second. You will remember it. Verse 2, that your way may be known on the earth, your salvation, notice on the earth, and then your salvation among all the nations. So notice the earth, the nations, that's going to be repeated. We're going to see the nations again in this short psalm. We continue verse 3. Let the peoples praise you, O God. Let all the peoples praise you. Now, just we're going to see this part too, but this is going to be word for word. And so this is going to be the refrain. We're going to have it again before we finish the psalm. Let the peoples praise you, O God. Which peoples? All the peoples of the earth, all the people who are out there. And just in case you didn't get that, let all the people praise you. It's it's repeated and emphasized. This isn't just the people of Israel. This is all the people. May they all praise you. Verse 4. Let the nations, that's not just Israel, that's the nations out there. Let the nations be glad and sing for joy. Notice the nations are going to be mentioned again when we get down to verse 4, guiding the nations. So we're going to have the nations and the nations. Are you starting to see some repetition here? You should. Let the nations be glad. Let me go back to it in the first part of verse 4 and sing for joy, for you will judge the peoples with uprightness. Now, let me just say that's going to be the pivotal point, the central point in the entire psalm. We're halfway through the psalm. That's the middle part. That's the can I call it the navel? That's how the Jews would put it. That's how Hebrew would put it. We don't usually describe the navel that way, but the center point, the central point, the pivotal point. Can't even say it for the entire psalm, and guide the nations on the earth. Selah. Again, the Selah to pause and reflect on what the psalm is saying. We go to verse 5. Let the peoples praise you, O God. Let all the peoples praise you. That's the refrain again. So notice it's a very short psalm. We saw the refrain the first time. We see it here the second time. Verse 6. The earth has yielded its produce. Now this takes it. This takes us into the farming aspect, into the agricultural aspect of the world of that day. And so we're praising you. We're praising you that the earth has yielded its produce. Don't take that for granted. Things don't always grow. Sometimes there can be famine. Sometimes there can be bad things. And yet, the people, not just the Israelites, all the people of the earth are called to praise because because God has granted the earth to yield its produce. Our God blesses us. Notice it's not just the people out there, but it's us. God blesses us that all the ends of the earth may fear him. And so notice a reference again to all the people out there, all the ends of the earth. God is the God not just of Israel, not just that little place in the Middle East. God is the God of all people, all the ends of the earth, and they need to learn to take him seriously. Notice how it's worded, and we've seen that word fear. Sometimes we render it be in awe, but I think fear is actually a little bit better. I like the person who said, if you haven't come into the presence of God and felt just a little bit of fear, you haven't really been into the presence of God. And I think that's reflected here as well. Now, looking back on the psalm, we're done? Yes, we're done. This is an outline of the entire psalm, this little psalm that we just saw. And what I want you to notice, it started off verse 1, God be gracious and bless us. And in verse 7, look down at the bottom, God blesses us. And so notice there's a blessing and a blessing. And then when we came to verse 2, that your way be known on the earth, look down at the verse 6 at the bottom. The earth has yielded its produce. You see, this is known as a chiasm. It's sort of a balanced approach. The first point and the last point are the same. The next point and the next to the last point are the same. Look at verse 3, let all the people praise you. Now, we said that's the refrain, remember? So that's word for word. And then again in verse 5, let all the people praise you. When we saw that doubling of the refrain, it causes us to come and look at the structure of the entire psalm. Verse 4, notice, first part of verse 4, let the nations be glad, the nations. And then at the end of verse 4, and he was to guide the nations on the earth. And we said that the middle part of verse 4, for you will judge the nations with uprightness, that was the pivotal point. This is what I mean. I want you to see the structure. This structure is known as a chiasm. I know that's a sort of a Greek term, but it's used to describe this sort of inverse parallelism with the central point being the pivotal point. Notice again verse 4, because I want to look at that, because we're called to look at that by its position in the psalm. For you will judge the nations with uprightness. In what way does God judge the nations with uprightness? Well, that's what the cross was all about. It was all about the God judging the nations. In his judgment said the nations, all men are without God, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But Jesus came as the savior of his people. He came first to his own, first to Israel, but not just to Israel. Now that has been extended to all creation, all mankind, so that we, instead of coming under the judgment of God by God's uprightness, by both his grace, but also his uprightness, he has fashioned a way by the death of his son, who took our place, died the death that we deserved, so that the demands of righteousness have been fulfilled, but also love and grace has been fulfilled. So I have both, where the place where righteousness meets love and grace is the place at the cross, where because of love he died for us, but also because of God's righteousness he died for us. In other words, he couldn't just say, well, you're forgiven, it's okay. No, no. In justice, sin demands a judgment. And so Jesus fulfilled the judgment in our place so that we can have the very righteousness of God in him.